I was reading a little about George Washington. I've always liked him. I didn't realize this, that he was elected unanimously both times in his election. He had all the electoral votes. Of course, there are some practical reasons for it. I mean, there were about 2 million people in the United States then, as opposed to 300 and some million now. So it's a little easier to have unanimity with 2 million than 300 million. But I think the bigger reason is, our biggest reasons are the obvious ones. I mean, he led the American army to victory against the British. He defeated them. And then in the Continental Convention, whatever it's called, he was instrumental in putting together the government, So, I mean, it seems natural that they would want him, that the people would want him to be their president and lead the country, in the beginning. And by all accounts, he didn't really want it. He had retired and he wanted to go back to his farm and just do farming things. But he accepted it out of the call. And he spent nothing. This is another thing I liked. He spent nothing on his campaign. He didn't even campaign because he didn't want it, David, when Saul had died, was asked, as we heard in the first reading, by the Israelites to be their king. All the tribes came. He was asked unanimously, if I can put it that way, to be king. And partly there were some prophecies about him. I'm sure that was part of it. But I think the bigger part is we hear this. In days past, when Saul was our king, it was you who led the Israelites out and brought them back. In other words, you led the armies out into battle. You defeated our enemies. You brought the armies back victorious, And so we want you to be our king. We know you are a good leader, The Father makes Jesus King of the universe for many reasons, but the main reason is somewhat similar. It was Jesus who led us in the battle against the enemy, defeated the enemy, and rose victorious. And as Paul says in that hymn to Philippians that I quote a lot, I know I quote it a lot, but it's worth hearing all the time, Because of Jesus' willingness to become a human being and to suffer and die for us, because of this, God highly exalted him and gave to him the name above every other name. So that at Jesus' name, the King of the universe, every knee must bend in the heavens, on the earth, and under the earth. And the reason Jesus had to come is, I say the reason is, partly only the Father really knows this and understands the whole plan of it. But it's pretty clear that God wanted human beings to be partners with God and have dominion over the earth. It's what he told Adam and Eve. The first, he's created, and he says, go and be fertile and multiply and have dominion over the earth. In other words, to rule over the earth. Dominus in Latin means Lord or King, But we screwed that up fairly quickly, didn't we? So in order to have a human being partner with God, Jesus came and became a human being. And we hear this with David. Here we are, your bone and your flesh. You're one of us. We don't want a foreign person, no matter how good, to be king. We want one of us to be king, and one of us who has shown himself to be a leader and to care about us. And so Jesus became one of us. In the letter to the Hebrews, he talks about it. He's flesh and bone and blood with us. He's human, like us in all things but sin, right? And what's he supposed to do as king? We'll hear this in the preface later on. He might accomplish the mysteries of human redemption, and making all created things subject to his rule, he might present to the immensity of your majesty, the Father, an eternal and universal kingdom. So he has two things he's mandated to do as king. One, make all things, all created things, subject to his rule. All created things. And so that was his project, right? Not to conquer by force and to beat people into submission. We know that, and he comes as a baby, And when he rides into Jerusalem, he rides not on a white charger, but on a donkey. And he rules not on an earthly throne, but from the cross. But he comes to subject all created things to his rule. Why? For his own self-aggrandizement? No. So that he could present to the Father a universal kingdom that would last forever. Even as king, he doesn't want his rule to be for himself, but for the Father. And what does that mean for us? Here's one of the things, it seems to me, is that we still are partners with God. Jesus is the king, and he sends us out like a king sends out his army to conquer the world. Again, not by the sword, as some religions would have it, but by love and service, by evangelization. And so we who are baptized into Christ's church are assigned a place in his army to go out and bring all created things under Christ's dominion, all things that choose it. Some will reject him, as some rejected him from the beginning. And why should we do this? What is it that we're doing? See, the world, the first world, so to speak, especially our culture, would like to relegate religion to one of those things. Okay, if you're religious, that's fine. You be religious, go to your little church and do whatever you want to do, But stay out of the public square. Stay out of government. Stay out of whatever, Stay out of the universities. And there are even Christians, even Catholics, who will say, stay out of my bedroom, stay out of my work, whatever, No, it's just the opposite. Listen to what kind of kingdom. So he might present to the immensity of your majesty an eternal and universal kingdom, a kingdom of truth and life, a kingdom of holiness and grace, a kingdom of justice, love, and peace. The world, left to its own devices, will not be a world of truth and life. Our ancient enemy, who was our enemy from the beginning, is still our enemy. The same one who tempted Adam and Eve is tempting us still. And he doesn't want a kingdom of truth and life. He wants a kingdom of death. He wants a kingdom of lies. He's the father of lies. John Paul II famously talked about that we need to build a culture of life. And that's what Jesus' kingdom is about. And so we need to go out, and wherever there is the kingdom of darkness at work, the kingdom of death at work, we need to be trying to create a kingdom of life. Wherever there is a kingdom of lies at work in the world, that's where we need to be, Christ's army, creating a kingdom of truth. It's the phrase, it just disgusts me when I hear it all the time now. People don't even blink. It doesn't even bother them. especially in politics. How is he going to spin this? How's she going to spin that? So as not to face the truth. Here's another phrase I hear still all the time, and it just drives me crazy. Speak your truth. I want to speak my truth to the world. There is not my truth and your truth and his truth and her truth. There is the truth. And so wherever we hear untruth, whether it's lies or spin or just not saying everything, we need to be there militating for the truth. Wherever there is death or the attempt to let death reign, we need to be there militating for life. A kingdom of holiness and grace. Sin abounds in the world, and left to its own devices, sin would take over the world. Right? And so wherever sin is, we need to be there as Christ's army, countering it with holiness and grace, being a conduit of God's grace for the world, being an example of holiness, an encourager of holiness. A kingdom of justice, love, and peace. Left to its own devices, the world would not be a just place. It would be a might makes right place. I mean, you see that, It will be a place where the majority would crush the minority. But wherever that is, the church, we, his army, Christ's army, need to be out militating for justice. Right? Love and peace. How much discord. One of the names for the Greek word for the devil is diabolos. From two words, bolo, to throw, and dia, like to throw, to scatter, To pit one person against another, or one group against another. And we see wherever the enemy reigns, there's discord and fighting, right? In our families, between people and community, different races, wars, whatever. And we, Christ's army, need to be out militating for peace, true peace between people, because that's what Christ's kingdom is about, and especially love. Everywhere in the world, left to its own devices, hate would rule. Maybe in my own tribe, I might love, but anyone outside my tribe, it would be okay to hate. And we see it. We see it all the time. But that's not Christ's kingdom. That's Satan's kingdom. And so one of the implications of celebrating the feast of Christ the King is to recognize a king has an army and we are it. And so it's our job to go out and spread Christ's kingdom, that all created things might be under Christ's dominion. Why? Because that dominion is the only true freedom in the world. And where the enemy wants to create death and discord and hate and sin, we need to be out militating for peace and love and holiness and being a conduit of God's grace. And if we do our part, then Christ will have, at the end of time, a great kingdom to present to God the Father. It's a kingdom that is meant to be a universal kingdom, and it's a kingdom that's meant to last forever.